Andre Drummond's an LA Laker.
Right.
LaMarcus Aldridge is a Brooklyn Net. And your mom's a Utah Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jazz kind of stood still at the deadline. And so far in free agency buyouts, they've done nothing. So I guess when we were watching Memphis versus the Jazz this weekend, and we were watching the Suns dominate, and we were watching, the Lakers get injected with some energy, which is different than a vaccine. And you're seeing that Kyrie Irving is coming back to the Nets now. I feel like the league, it's hard to say shifted, but the top teams in the NBA got much better.
Yeah, and I think the Jazz just kind of stood still. They didn't. I feel like the signing of Ersan and Matt and these guys they're just not guys that are going to see time. And I think that while on a surface level you could say, well, these guys can shoot a little bit, they could possibly do some things. Let's be honest. These guys are not going to be in the rotation. These guys are not going to sniff any kind of major minutes. They're not going to do really anything for the team except fill out the roster. And so, you look at the Lakers getting Andre Drummond. You look at the Nets getting not only Blake Griffin, but LaMarcus Aldridge now. And I just start to have some concerns. I start to say, hey, Jazz front office people, this is one of the years where in the Western Conference, you could pretty easily get to the NBA Finals. You're not going to probably go through a fully healthy Lakers team. The Clippers, you've shown that you've been able to handle. And the Nuggets are really the only other team that's really going to give you some serious fight that could potentially send you home. So I just can't for the life of me believe that the Jazz didn't really get too much better. And this is why I feel like this kind of goes back to that conversation we were having late last week with everybody about the mindset of the front office. Like, it seems like this front office thinks that this Jazz team is ready to go. And I guess that's where I disagree with them.
Yeah, the thing that really stands out to me is I was hoping for a change in attitude. And when I say attitude, I mean the front office of the Utah Jazz. I point to the Phoenix Suns as an organization that realized they were just not doing the right things. They were losing a ton of money. They still have one of the worst owners in the NBA, but now they're stocked with talent. The CP3 signing or acquisition was a huge step in the right direction. Absolutely filled a need. But they've done a great job in hiring Monty Williams to be their head coach. They've developed their talent. I just look at, like, Mikal Bridges stands out to me. The evolution of DeAndre Ayton as an offensive player. He has clearly worked on his jump shot. I just think the way that the Suns have come together. I look at Andre Drummond in LA. That's a move that says we're the LA Lakers. We need to improve. Let's go get the best available big because that's where we're struggling. And that's exactly what they did. I look at the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets have decided they can never have enough talent because when you go and sign a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, that's another huge signing. Blake Griffin, who can't dunk anymore, apparently can dunk when he puts on a Nets uniform. It's remarkable to me that all of these elite teams, Jake, have this mentality of domination and improvement, and I just don't feel like that's where the Jazz are. I feel like the Jazz are in a position where they're not concerned about getting better, and maybe they just think they're good enough.
Yeah.
But I got news for you. They're not.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a little surprising to me that they've done absolutely nothing to improve this ball club.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think when we look at this, the NBA from the perspective of, okay, what is a potential NBA Finals matchup looking like right now? Well, if I answer that question right here today, yeah, I think it's probably it's either the Lakers or the Jazz coming out of the West. And I think it's the Brooklyn Nets coming out of the East. Yes, will they face some adversity in the postseason? Sure, every team does. But I just think they have so much talent that you're going to overcome that. You're going to be able to basically just dominate the East the way that they have. So I just kind of say, hey, the East is going to the Nets, and that's who's coming out of the East. The West, however, I think is a different story. I think when you've got all 3 or 4 of these teams that are going to battle it out to the end, and I can easily say that the Jazz are probably the most reliant on the 3 out of any of these teams. That concerns me because, again, as we saw when they got tired at the end of the first half, what happened? Their percentage went down. They started to not make threes. They started to really struggle We saw them mentally kind of go in the crapper, if you will, because they started complaining about officiating and this and that and all the other. And so I guess my biggest thing right now is that I don't know that the Jazz are good enough even to beat the Nuggets. We watched Aaron Gordon yesterday. He looked good. He looked like a difference maker. There was one possession in particular where he's guarding Trae Young one-on-one and holding his own and forcing Trae Young into a very difficult step-back three that was off balance. And what happens? Trae Young misses the shot. They get the rebound. They go down and get a high percentage look. So that's why I say I think the Nuggets are a very dangerous team. I think it's then the Lakers, and then I think it's the Jazz in terms of who's going to the finals.
Well, and I also think the other thing that stands out about what we saw over the weekend was very clearly the way that Memphis came back on Friday night. If you're a Jazz fan, that's scary. I think you look at the way Ja Morant was able to, absolutely attack the paint and the basket. Now, Saturday night was a much different story. He looked like he was dead on his feet. They didn't play well, and the Jazz are clearly a better team than Memphis. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Memphis is a better team, but Memphis, again, demonstrated that smaller, attacking, athletic players are going to give the Jazz problems. And I think when you have Ja Morant going to the basket, just death-defying shots, that dunk on Saturday was unbelievable.
Crazy.
That was unbelievable. If you missed it, go look at the highlights. It's on my timeline on Twitter, The Monty Show, Monty, The Monty Show. It just shows you that a smaller, athletic guard can really attack the basket against the Jazz. And that's what, if you look at Denver is a great example, because we watched all of that game pretty much yesterday. That team scares me. For the first time I watched the Nuggets, and I wondered aloud, man, I think they might be better than the Jazz. And I haven't said that. I don't believe that the Lakers are better than the Jazz. I don't know who the Clippers are. Again, I know we seemingly have this conversation every day about the Clippers. I don't know who the Clippers are.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can believe the Clippers are the best team in the West because they just don't show that on a regular basis. But that's because mainly they don't have a lineup that plays together on a regular basis. So that'll be interesting. But I think it's the Jazz. I think it's the Nuggets. I'm really interested to see what happens with LeBron's injury. No update this week on the high ankle sprain. Anthony Davis cleared to, again, pick up his basketball playing a little bit more, get a little more intense, be able to jump. He can dunk now. All these things mean that everybody behind the Jazz is improving.
Yeah.
And they're coming. I don't know what the Jazz are doing. I look out east, I agree with you 100%. It's the Brooklyn Nets and everybody else. And I don't know that there's a close second.
No, there's not a close second in the East. And I think the thing that's terrifying to me about the West is just that it seems like I was thinking about this over the weekend. And if you look back to the way the first half in the Western Conference kind of played out, you had the Jazz who got off to this great start. They end up dominating the first half in the Western Conference. Everyone's like, oh, this is the best team. They're definitely going to the finals this year. Everything's awesome. And then, the last probably 12 games of the first half of the NBA season for the Jazz were just not good. You had the Clipper game, you had the Philly game, you had many games where you just didn't shoot well. And I think that the issue here, we talk about teams all the time, like the New Orleans Pelicans this weekend, as an example, don't know how to win. They don't know how to close games out. They don't know how to finish games. And the point that I'm getting to here is that the Jazz had this scorching hot first half. Now, at the trade deadline, you didn't really do anything because you thought that you were good enough, and all your competitors got better and are probably pretty close to even with you now, in my opinion. And so it just begs the question, do the Jazz actually know right now, here today, does this front office know how to take them to the finals through the trade deadline, through free agency, through the buyout market, all that stuff? And I just think that they're lacking a little bit there.
Yeah, again, I will just say the best franchises in pro sports know where they are, they know where they're going, and they know what they need to get there. And I just don't think that's where the Jazz mentality is. And it's disappointing because you have this new young gun owner. I thought things would be different.
Yeah.
Right? But the real question is, what does Andre Drummond bring to the Lakers? He does not make the Lakers better than the Jazz. I saw this conversation on Twitter last night. Andre Drummond's a lot of things. I think he's a dominant. Anybody that can block a shot with their left hand automatically has an advantage. Most shot blocking, if you watch it, is a right-handed weapon. Andre Drummond can block shots with his left hand. That means that he plays incredible backside defense. He is always a threat at the rim. What he brings is a real shutdown force at the rim for the Lakers. I think that's really important because that's been a problem for them. I think that Andre Drummond limits Rudy Gobert quite a bit. He makes Rudy's life a lot more difficult. The Jazz are better than the Lakers right now. If LeBron and AD come back, we'll have a different conversation. Right now, I think the Jazz are better. I don't think the Jazz are better than the Nuggets. If once Aaron Gordon really gets integrated into their system, especially attacking the basket offensively, he doesn't really have an offensive role after one game. They haven't figured out where to incorporate him. But I think to your point, there's no doubt Aaron Gordon made the Nuggets a better defensive team. And that's really what you had to question is could they match up with anybody across the front line in the Western Conference? I think they were struggling to match up against the Jazz up front. That was a real weakness. I don't think that's such a weakness anymore. I think that Aaron Gordon not only gives them a matchup, I think he gives them an advantage because Bogdanovic is not going to be able to guard him. And Favors is not going to be able to guard him. I want to see Favors and Gobert on the floor together. That's one thing that I feel like is missing for the Jazz. And if we go down the standings a little bit, now granted, I look at the Suns. Obviously, they're lofty right now. Are they truly the second best team in the West?
I mean, in a regular year, no, they're not. But again, they can only deal with the circumstances that they have to deal with. So it's unfair to say, well, you know, they're not the second best team in the West because the Lakers are hurt. Okay, well then the Jazz aren't the best team in the league because the Lakers are hurt. You know, like you can't have it both ways. So yeah, they are I think that the thing with the Jazz is that Chris Paul's leadership makes it so that they don't get flustered in a lot of different situations. They're able to keep themselves centered and grounded through adversity in a game. So when the Jazz pop off for 4 threes and they go on their 12-0 run or whatever, the Suns are able to just say, okay, they did their thing, but now we have to answer. Now we have to come back and we have to impose our will. And so they've been able to do that, which is why they're not getting blown out anymore, which is why they're in a lot of these games and they're winning a lot of close games. And I think that a 7-gamer between the Suns and the Jazz would be incredibly entertaining. Yeah, I think it would be a great series.
I think it'd be great. And I'm just curious. I know that we talk about the NBA every day on this show.
Yeah.
But I look at the Suns and I look at the balance that's come to that offense. It's not just Devin Booker.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm worried about with the Jazz. It is Donovan and everybody else. Matt Thomas, he is what he is. He's never going to be a star in this league.
His top end is J.J. Redick. That's his top end, purpose-wise.
I don't even think so. I think J.J. Redick is a superior player. And
for sure.
I think for obvious reasons. He's a proven performer. He goes to the playoffs every year. He's minted.
Yeah.
I look at Ersan Ilyasova. I just don't know that he can do it anymore. These guys are, 12th, 13th men off the bench. And when you have a coach in Quinn Snyder that likes to play 8 guys, and if you really put a gun to his head, he'll play 9, you're never going to see Ilyasova or Thomas. You're never going to get to that end of the bench. And I think that's a problem for the Jazz. You can't go up against teams like the Suns who can go 10, 11 deep. And you play 8 guys.
Yeah.
You're gonna lose the wear and tear battle there. But a 7-gamer with the Suns and the Jazz,
yeah.
I think that would be ripe for an upset. Because I think any way you look at it, the Jazz would have to be favored that series,
yeah,
right?
Of course, yeah.
I think you'd be ripe for a Suns upset. I think the Jazz would have to execute. The things about the Jazz that worry me right now is, I look at Bogey, he's passing up open threes because he just doesn't believe in it. He hit a 3 that was like all wet. Like it was a net snapper. It was,
beautiful. Exactly
awesome.
what you would expect.
But they were up 25 points. And he was wide open. And
no pressure shot.
He let it fly.
Yeah.
I just want him to shoot it every single time. He's such a good 3-point shooter when he's on. I want to see Bogey shoot that ball every single time.
Yeah.
Without hesitation. Be Tom Brady. Every time you throw the football, it's a touchdown.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't matter if the last one was picked off because the next one is 6. Seriously, if you're bogey, shoot the 3 every time. It doesn't matter if you're 0 for your last 69. The 70th one's going in.
And seriously,
right?
the great ones in the league have that mentality. I mean, whether it's LeBron, Kobe, certainly Michael, any of these great shooters, like think of Steph, or think of like Reggie Miller, or think of Ray Allen, or any of these great shooters that have to be respected. Short memory is what you have to have in the league. I mean, literally, these guys, it's their job to make shots. So, if you go again, I think at one point, I'd have to look this stat up, but I think at one point Bogdanovic went in the deepest part of his slump. He was like 0 for 20, I think. Like there was a time when he was like 0 for his last 20. And you just have to keep shooting it. And it's so funny, whether you're talking about like sales or running a business or making a jumper as an NBA player, you just have to keep shooting. You just have to keep giving yourself the chance, and eventually it's going to start going in again.
Well, I look at the Memphis Grizzlies and I wonder, right now they're in they're in the 9th spot, so they're in the 9-10 game with Golden State, right? And don't forget the playoffs are expanded. They're the 7-8 team. The 7th team and the 8th team are going to play a 1-game playoff game to determine who's the 7th seed. The 9-10 teams in the conference will play a 1-game playoff to see who's the 8th seed.
Which I love, by the way. I think that's brilliant.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you're a team like the Lakers right now, you're teetering on top 5. Mm-hmm. And you want to stay out of that 4-5 matchup. Mm-hmm. You want to stay out of that 4-5, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
If it ended today, it would probably be Jazz and Warriors in round 1. Jazz are way better than the Warriors right now, right?
Yeah, well, and I think the only thing I think the Jazz would really have to even be concerned about, or not even worried, just like mindful of, I would say, is just that Steph would come back for that series. He's going to come back. I think the toughness of Kelly Oubre sometimes can bring the momentum towards the Warriors, but overall,
but do they even want Oubre on that team?
I mean, I would want him on my team. I mean, if I was them, yeah.
They tried to move him.
I'm sure they did try to move him. That doesn't mean they don't want him on their team. But again, this is what we were just saying, right? The best teams in the league, because don't forget, just because the Warriors are a bad team this year does not mean they still don't have one of the best front offices in the league. Because
I agree.
They do. And so, yes, they did try to move him, but I don't think that's an indictment on Kelly Oubre. I think it's just the Warriors saying, hey, we're a bad team right now, but we understand that being a bad team this year is an opportunity because we know Klay's coming back. We know we're going to have the Splash Brothers for at least another 3 seasons together probably. Let's try to get as good as we can before he comes back. So I think that's all that was.
Do they make the play-in game, the Warriors?
Yeah.
Because by the way, don't sleep on the Sacramento Kings. Mm-hmm. That team gets into a playoff game. I mean, they can. De'Aaron Fox is playing at an incredibly high level right now.
Yep.
He has finally turned into the point guard they thought he would be when they drafted him. De'Aaron Fox is a stud.
Yep.
Anyway, my point is, all of this to say, there are not a lot of easy outs in the Western Conference. If you make the playoffs, you got a chance of winning, going to the conference finals and winning the conference finals.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care who you are. Now, realistically, it's probably Jazz, Suns, Clippers, Lakers, Nuggets.
Yeah.
Hey, that's 5 teams that have a chance to win the conference.
It's crazy.
Right? The Dallas Mavericks, I do not want to run into the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't. And right now they're in that 7-8 spot. Mm-hmm. They have to play a 1-game play-in.
And they're a dangerous team. They got a lot of momentum right now, with Porzingis really emerging, turning into, again, just like you were saying about De'Aaron, Porzingis is really turning into the guy that they wanted him to be. Now, the matter of health is always going to be there, but as long as he's healthy, they're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, I think the West is nuts. By the way, why is nobody talking about Philly as the best team in the East?
Because I think Joel's hurt, and I think that people's opinions on the Nets are that Kevin Durant is resting. He's not actually hurt, that he's just taking his time. So,
but
I don't
why?
know.
At what point do you put him back in there? I mean,
Soon.
May 22nd's coming.
Yeah, it's got to be, I don't know. I think right here today, I think if tomorrow was a postseason game, he would play. He would play. Kevin Durant will play. But
I mean, I would guess so, but I certainly don't think that means a slam dunk that they win. I don't know, dude. I look at what I look at what NBA teams are, the best NBA teams.
Mm-hmm.
Chemistry is always such a big part. And I still have that little question
Right.
about the Nets' chemistry when all three of those guys are playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's assumed. I think that's why it was so critical that they signed LaMarcus Aldridge.
Yeah.
Because he gives them that championship pedigree. I think when I look at teams like the Lakers, you don't question their chemistry. But I look at the Clippers, they have no chemistry.
Right.
So they're always a disappointment. I just think there's so much unknown about those three in Brooklyn.
Yep.
I think it's fascinating. By the way, this Kyrie Irving thing where he doesn't play games and he just takes time off and they're like, all right, cool, man. And then he just comes back.
Yep.
And it's like nothing ever happened. I don't know how that's possible.
I just don't know how it's acceptable.
I really don't.
I don't know when we got to a point in the league where that was okay, and it's like he's just like, okay, I'm a superstar, I can do whatever I want. And it's like, well, first of all, COVID protocols, number one. Number two, chemistry on the floor, and then number three, James Harden is likely the MVP this year after this transition to the Nets. You're literally leaving a team that is working its ass off to go and win a ring, and this is your real first legit opportunity. I feel like for Kyrie Irving to go and win a ring without LeBron, and you're just you're cool to just go and chill with your family
without LeBron.
Yeah.
Well, he replaced LeBron with James Harden and Kevin Durant. And I think that matters. By the way, they open up. They play Minnesota at home tonight, Houston Wednesday, Charlotte Thursday, at the Bulls Sunday. Then it's the Knicks, New Orleans, and the Lakers, all at home.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a pretty easy, long stretch here of games that takes them into the middle of the month when on Wednesday, April 14th, they go to Philly.
Yep. Big game.
Huge game.
What was that? You said the 18th of April?
14th.
14th. So I mean that Kevin Durant will play in that game. They've been saying that he's been about 2 weeks out, that they're really taking their time with him. I would be surprised if he didn't play in that game.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think I love the Nets I think they're the best team in the NBA. By the way, if I look at the Utah Jazz schedule, and I don't know how many people have peeped on the Jazz schedule, Cleveland at Memphis, Chicago, Orlando, at Dallas, at Phoenix, Portland, Sacramento.
It's a lot of wins.
It's a lot of wins. And by the way, then it's Washington, OKC, and Indiana at home.
A lot of wins.
To the middle of the month.
So I'm saying, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they kept the 1 seed. I don't think that's even really in question.
Their schedule down the stretch is more interesting. I mean, they have back-to-back with the Lakers in LA on the 17th and 19th. But then it's Houston, then it's back-to-back with Minnesota, and then it's at Sacramento, at Phoenix, home for Toronto, back-to-back with San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be the 1 seed.
I think so.
But I think that I'm just telling you guys, be cautious with this because being that they're the 1 seed, they'll have home court advantage, everything will be cool, but that just makes it all the worse if you don't do your job.
It does. It really,
you're the
really
1
does.
seed, you have home court advantage, and you still lost? Like, come on, we have to be better.